White Shark Video Sharkcast. I am your host, Skylar Thomas. Today I have a very special guest, Sara Andreotti, and she is in the Cape Coast of South Africa. She is a scientist there. And Sara, why don't you introduce yourself better than I could? Tell us a little bit about your background.
Oh, well, you nailed my surname, which is great. I'm Dr. Sara Andreotti. I work in South Africa. I'm a lecturer at the University of Stellenbosch.
Huh?
And I've been working on white sharks since 2009.
Since 2009. Okay, that's a pretty long time ago.
Yeah, I'm aging.
Not as fast as I am.
Not bad.
My first time with white sharks in South Africa was 2004, then 2007, 2014. And so
wow.
if you started and you were in Hanspy, or you
the first time I came down was 2007, but I was still, a little student with a group of Italians coming for a week.
From Stellenbosch or
No, from Italy.
From Italy.
Yeah.
Okay.
I was still busy with my master. So that I was sort of looking at white sharks, but I wouldn't call that working. That's why I put when I started working in 2009 when I moved here.
So you went down, you just checked out the white sharks, and then you were sold on it, and you're like, I'm going to figure out how to come down here and study
Pretty
these.
much.
Cool.
To be more precise, I begged Michael Ratzen to work with him.
I remember you worked with Michael, so you started with Michael, like right from 2009.
I did.
Off the bat.
I did.
And what was working with Michael like?
Interesting, because what Michael had in his head is not something I could study in books. So I could rely on 20 years of observation in the field of these animals. That every time I was behind a book learning how to do statistics, he was diving with the sharks. So it's not something you can acquire into the academia. So it was a good marriage, I would say.
He had the in-person, the observation science, if you will, the time in the water with the animals, and you had the academic side of it. And
precisely.
You the two.
Yeah. Yeah.
This is not a fair question, but I'm going to throw it out anyway, just to see how you respond. Which one's more important? How do you balance those two types of knowledge?
I think they're equally important. And these days, I would urge more scientists to speak with the people that spend their life in the ocean, because there is too much of a disconnect in between the people that know the theory and the people that sees what is happening. So I think they are equally important. The observation alone won't stand a chance if you want to implement policies, because you need numbers, you need statistics to ensure that the observation is not just random, but you need up-to-date observation before you start modeling. So yeah, no, I think they're equally key if we want to figure this out properly.
I agree with you. I'm so glad that you said that. That's great. The disconnect, I could go down a rabbit hole of sometimes I feel like, you and I have spoken enough times, so I can be honest with you, and you can tell me if I step over the line, but sometimes I feel like there is a little bit of a disconnect, as you mentioned, with scientists who are able to objectify the very subject of their study because they aren't actually there spending time with it, and maybe don't treat the animal in the manner that it needs to be treated. Any truth to that, or am I off? Yeah.
No, I think I agree. I think it also depends which studies we are talking about, because certain science is a little more, how can I put it, statistically easy to work on than others. And it has a lot to do with sample size. Stats done on genetics, for instance, you need 100 to 100 samples, and the outcome that comes from a genetic study is fairly accurate, because you need a large sample size. You have to work on that. The marker you use when you figure the statistics is huge. You look at inside a lot of parts of these genes. Whether other studies like behavioral studies, they always suffer from a lack of data because the field work on sharks is challenging.
Mm.
So it makes genetics takes time because you have to collect the sample, then extract the DNA in the lab. So you have the field work, the lab work, and only after you get the raw data, and then you can analyze. But behavioral study, uh, you don't just need a sample, you need to get the right visibility, the right weather so that you can film the interactions, and you need enough sharks to come around. So these kind of studies always lack, by the nature, it's difficult to get enough data out of it. And then it is difficult for scientists to be certain about what they see, statistically wise. Whether if somebody goes out for 15 years and he sees consistently one shark being more playful than another, he will tell you this shark is a player. You can see from the way he behaves. But from that to make a study out is, it's difficult.
And
If that makes sense, it's not just the scientist that wants to be too fixated with being objective. It is objectively a challenge to get enough data when it comes to behavior. That's what I'm trying to get.
Absolutely. It makes a lot of sense. And, someone who observed an animal who behaved in a unique manner from the others of its own species, not even a different species of shark, but from its own species, you still have the challenge of people who just don't want to accept that because of a certain indoctrination. And so how do you put that into a scientific paper that, look, this is what I saw. I don't know how else to explain it. You just have to trust me at some point. So data-wise.
Yeah, no, that is where the line becomes blur. Is I don't think science should be a belief system. It is not. It is.
It isn't. It is in America.
Only in America, you don't
I
have
hope.
to believe that. You don't have to believe the result. You have to understand how did they come. It's a matter of understanding. It's not a matter of faith. But to jump back on this observation, I think that for a lot of other animals, things changed over time. And with enough observation, we started learning about social structure, social dynamic. We started looking at herd of elephants having a matriarch. We started looking at pack of wolf having very structured social interaction. And it is my hope that with the new camera, the new underwater battery and camera that we have now, and remember, we didn't have these GoPro 30 years ago, 20 years ago. Now that the technology is improving, if we can protect the sharks in such a way that we will still have something to observe, I believe that with enough data, we will start discovering similar things with these animals too. So it worked for land animal. Why shouldn't it work for the marine one? We just need enough time.
And I'd say, I don't know, it feels like we're running out of time in that.
Yes, that's another problem. When I started working, I was dreaming one day to be diving in By, in a day of perfect visibility and just filming with 3D camera how these 15, 20, 30 sharks were interacting with each other, because that's what we could see from the boat. And it wasn't the time to do that when I started, because we still didn't know how many were left. We didn't know if we could identify them with the dorsal fin. There was a lot of background work that needed to be done before getting there. And by the time my ground work was done, now the sharks are gone. So you can imagine it's a tad frustrating because they're going away faster than we can study them.
Yeah. And who would have known? Who would have known the great white shark capital of the world? I mean, well, that's almost a dumb statement. Some people did know. Some people predicted it.
We counted them. Yes.
Well, man, it's hard to avoid this. Let's dive into the controversy because where you were studying, we talked about sample size and how to do a proper study already. We talked about your attempt to observe the animals, and by the time you were ready to move on to the next stage, they were gone. The great white shark capital of the world no longer has white sharks effectively.
Yep.
And only a few years before they were basically gone, you had put out a study that was controversially received by some that, hey, the numbers are not good. So let's just dive into that study and what happened from that study. And just from you, it's quite the honor to have the author here. So you
We
tell
counted
us.
them. What must I say?
Yes.
Look, that was the job, right? Trying to figure out how many sharks are we talking about, because there were some studies done, but they were either done with, again, poor sample size, or was done with software that were not good for sharks. There was ID software developed for dolphins that had a 60% failure rate when tested on great white sharks.
You're talking
So
about some,
there
you're
were
talking
some.
about, are you talking right now, those criticisms you mentioned, or those are other studies that you're comparing to?
Yes, there were other
Okay.
studies that were done in, but they have very limited sample size. So all I did was just being on the boat every time the weather was good enough to be on the boat. So for 3 years, every time this cage diving vessel was launching, I was there taking my photo, coming home, analyzing them, organizing the database, and I mean that's all I wanted. That's all I had to do. So make it's such a dream job actually for the first 3 years of my work.
Mm-hmm. And
The
let me paint a picture for some people at home too. Where you are, when you say 3 years, you're not talking about making it out occasionally over a span of 3 years. You're talking about going out
no like
almost daily.
20 every time the weather allowed, which
Exactly.
means 20 days a month. So there was no weekend, there was no holiday, especially during the holiday, because that is when the cage diving operates even more because there is more tourists, right? So every time the sea was good enough for the boat to launch, I was on that boat. And that is also, I must say, is thanks to Mike, because Mike also insisted on that.
Hmm.
Mike Ratzem told me, if you start having gap in your data, then you will have to come up with something. But if your data are solid and there is no discussion around your data collection, then all you have to do is looking at the result and analyze them. And that was key. We got
And,
basically 4,800 photo ID over these 3 years. I'm not talking about sharks photo. I'm talking about very good, high quality dorsal fin photographs.
unmistakably, identified
Yeah,
with an
that you can
individual.
really, and that was also part of the work, making peace with the fact that a lot of photos are bad and the quality is not good enough. So you sort of see the shark and you sort of think you know it. Then these photos, I just eliminated them. I throw them in the bin
What you're
because
saying
I
is
wanted the.
your 4,000 something sample size did not include questionable quality. You only went with
No.
undeniable photos.
Yes, I throw away 10 times this amount of photos. So
Wow.
everything that was not obviously like crisp and good. I mean, no, I had this discussion with some colleague, and I made peace with that. Like I mentioned earlier, is science is not a religion-based system. You don't need to have faith in my data. You have only two options. You can ask me the raw data
Hmm.
and analyze them again and show me where did I get it wrong. because analysis, can be wrong. Or you go out there, you get more data than I did, reanalyze them, and prove me I'm wrong. There isn't a third option of just saying, I don't believe you.
Yeah, I agree.
I don't think it is productive to dig in the past of who say what, and
yeah, we'll leave out
it's
the
not
names.
productive for the animals. You see, what bothers me is that there are very few scientists working on white sharks. The more time we spend bashing each other, the less time we spend working on the animals and producing results. So we are working on different techniques also. I'm not going to have a saying on acoustic tags because it's not my field. If other scientists wanted to have a saying on genetics and 4D without physically working on them, that is their choice. But I don't want to be part of this discussion. It's pointless.
Okay. So, but there was some controversy about the study. So if it wasn't about that, do you remember what there was, or was it otherwise? Was it generally well received?
No, there was 1 year later, some colleagues sent to the journal a comment to my study where they wrote down the part they disagreed on. But again, there was no additional data provided. So it wasn't a matter of she counted 426 sharks, but we collected so many photos in the same area and we counted, I don't know, 800. Please see database attached. Or this genetic study around the coast proved that the animals are genetically panmictic is one population. There is no structure. They didn't say, but we had evidence of the contrary based on these other samples. They just said, we don't think that is right. So it was a very easy comment to address. And the journal, because that's how science works, they publish their comment and they publish our rebuttal to the comment so that people can go and read the whole thing.
But that comment came without data, which makes it feel like it's not a very scientific comment that was put forth by scientists.
I suppose people have the right to send comments. And what I did, there were one thing that I didn't do in the first paper was providing all of the different permutation of the population estimate model. There are 8 of them. And I only show the 3 most significant one in the paper. In the rebuttal, I reanalyzed everything. I double-check everything, and I publish all 8. That's how it works. If you want to see all of the permutation, fantastic. I will publish them. I don't think it should be, it's not personal. It's just, is what that did, in fact, was slowing down the conservation effort towards the species, that bothered me. Because at that stage, we were having discussion with the government about, okay, this is the most updated data set and publication we have at hand. What can we do about it? That already working with governments in general takes time. In that sense, when we arrive with this data, the fact that some colleagues sent comments and created a debate around it slowed down the progress. So for that, I wasn't happy because these animals needed all the protection they can get.
We had something similar to that happen in California, where it was actually a conservation institute that loves to go out and tag the living hell out of animals, actually complained that California was looking at increasing protections for the white shark. And it boggled my mind. I was like, well, why would you ever want to get in the way of that? I thought that's what the goal of getting all this data collection was. And it turns out it would have actually prevented the increased protection, would have prevented them from some of the techniques that they were using. Now, bringing this back to South Africa, South Africa is the first country that listed the white shark as protected.
Absolutely.
So
1991.
91, correct. And so it's technically protected. So what was the next aim? How do you increase protection for a protected animal? And why would anyone want to get in the way of that?
Predators. Well, they're top predators, so they need their ecosystem to be really, really well functional for them to survive. In actual fact, the presence of white shark is an indication of a healthy ecosystem, because if the food chain is not right and the pollution is happening, it's very difficult for top predators to be supported. And because of the abundance of South African water, and white sharks were here. So to protect such an animal, you need to protect the entire ecosystem. There isn't a way around it. So that includes protecting their food, minimizing the catch. They're not supposed to have predators on top of them. So minimizing bycatch, enforcing the existing policy, because unfortunately there is a big difference in between making an animal protected and actually protecting it. Mm-hmm. So if on paper they say do not catch it, but if somebody poaches it, there is no follow-up in the police force or in persecuting the person, then what kind of protection is that?
So did that ever improve? Because I remember that being an issue back when I was deep into the South African thing. And I think one guy got prosecuted ever.
Yes, one guy got that thing in Mossel Bay. They managed to get one guy that was an angler to be persecuted for that. And they made a good example of this. But at the same time, there are a lot of boats out there fishing without any camera observers. There is no control. And I don't blame the fishermen. Don't get me wrong. I don't think it is their responsibility to take care of white shark. I think it is the government responsibility to take care of white sharks. So they cannot dumping it on the fishermen. They should put things in place that prevent that.
But something is in place, but no one's enforcing it. So you have a rule, but the rule's being broken and nobody's paying attention to the rule because there's no
something in place. Writing something on paper is not putting things in place.
But it did reduce it a little bit when it officially became, not acceptable to go out and fish for white sharks. That at least cut down on some percentage of the population who did it, but not the people who were willing to break rules.
No, and that is the people that breaks the rules. Now, I'm still trying to, how can I put it? Compute how is it that our government had a thriving ecotourism industry based on white sharks, and international tourists came to see these animals. And they had a good understanding of the importance, so much so that it was protected in 1991. But they've been giving an exemption to KwaZulu-Natal Shark Board to still kill them. That boggles my mind.
It's a war of two monies. I've just started re-editing my film about the Natal Shark Sport. It's mind-boggling, but
yeah, it's like the elephant in the room. Every time we have a meeting, we have a white shark group meeting, and we have a representative KwaZulu-Natal Shark Board in the meeting because they market themselves as the shark research excellency.
Right.
For me, it's like having the elephant in the room. Like you should stop. I don't know how else to put it.
Did you go? Were you present at the symposium that they hosted, and all these people came to talk about sharks, hosted by the #1 killer of white sharks?
Shark International. Yep. Yes, I was there.
Yeah. So, how
explains.
What did you think about that?
It's not the only symposium they host. They host also they were part of the Southern Africa Marine Science Symposium this year. They put a lot of effort in their image, and they make themselves very available for scientists that needs sample, and they try to make a lot of effort in keeping their image to the public as the protectors of the beach. But reality is that they're killing our marine life and they're doing it legally. And if we don't start standing up to that, it's never going to end.
So, again, I have a privilege of actually speaking face to face with a scientist. And, in many realms, I'm on the outs because of my feelings on this, but you're out there getting data to try to increase protections for an animal, and yet to complete studies that scientists collaborate with the number one killer of the animals that they're trying to save. And I think you get the word conservation and research and science thrown out enough times, people buy into it. But to me, like you are collaborating with the killer.
Yeah. Also, there is there have been in the past this mentality that the end result of the science justify what we are doing to to the animals because the results are more important. And I think based on the fact that there are so few of these animals left, I think it's also time to reconsider this way of doing things. We should prioritize the well-being of the animals over some of the results that we can get, and just ask ourselves, how is this specific study going to make a big difference for these animals in the long term? And if the answer is, well, we can do that differently, or, well, we have enough information to wait for the population to rebound, or whatever the case is, and if the answer is, we actually don't need the data from KwaZulu-Natal Shark Board to study sharks, then there is no reason for this nest to be up. So we need to rebalance that and reconsider that. We have a better understanding of how ecosystem works now. We have better technologies. In the past, I could not get, I'm talking before the PCR, you needed a very big chunk of tissue to study the genetics of an animal. A lot of genetic studies were invasive to the point that you need to kill the animal if you want to do the study. Now technology improved, we just need a little tissue sample. We have underwater scuba diving equipment and spear gun. We don't even need to restrain the animals to take a sample in certain cases. So the technology improved, and I think the mentality must catch up. So this excuse of, but they are collaborating with so many scientists, so they're important, is okay, at what cost?
And
so, no.
I'd never thought about the financials between the two coasts, because on the Cape Coast, the shark tourism is a massive, massive draw of income. Now, up where KwaZulu-Natal Sharks Board and the nets are in, the tourism are the beaches, Durban, the hotels. So I would almost present that they are saying our finances for tourism, where people have been indoctrinated to think that you can only swim at these quote protected beaches, is more important than your money down there that depends on the existence of these animals.
Or I can throw you another one.
Sure.
Stay in KwaZulu-Natal. You go a little higher up, you have Aliwal Shoal, you have Sodwana, you have, again, diving companies that makes a living out of alive sharks. Not leave the white sharks. I'm talking about the bull shark, the tigers, the black tip. They are making they have a thriving industry there for people to come and see the sharks alive. And around the corner, the same animal gets killed, also in the name of tourism. because of a mentality that started in 1950. I mean, surely it is time to move away from that.
So, speaking of surely it's time to move away, can we use this as an opportunity to talk about the shark cable that the Sharks board has been working on since the 70s? I have chosen to split this interview up into different parts in order to keep the focus of this one on the white sharks of South Africa and the studies that were involved prior to the white shark disappearance. You can catch the rest of this interview in parts 2 and parts 3 to be released soon. We got to talking about so many things last time. I didn't get to, some of the.
We talk about everything but sharks or something like that.
Yeah. Back when everyone was blaming the orcas, I got bitter because I was like, there's no way that orcas have caused an entire population of white sharks to disappear, considering that the white sharks have probably been there for thousands of years, if not, more. And it couldn't have been the first time that white sharks have had a problem with orcas. Way before humans even came into the picture. This has to have been going on.
But he makes such a good story, you see, that he's done a lot wilder than, don't ruin my good story with hard facts, sort of thing.
Exactly.
So, yeah. So how was your chat with Mr. Fellow?
It was good. I mean, that guy is so spot on. He talks so well, and he's got all of his information down. He obviously is in it for the animals. I mean, he's clearly benefited. Good. He's benefited as well, but what a great guy. And Monique too.
Yeah. Good.
And
very good.
And he listed you and Enrico as some of the few scientists that were saying, "Hey, no."
Yeah.
And I didn't realize. I knew it was bad, but I didn't realize that there was a new deal allowing the inshore shark fishery. That's just absurd.
Did you read there was a panel of experts called I think last year or the year before, most likely the year before, called by the Minister of Environment to discuss the effect of the white shark disappearance, what caused it, what is going to be the knockdown effect on the economy, the implication for the tourism, etc., etc. And that is the panel that came out with they also confirmed that it was just a natural event caused by orca and all the fishery is fine. And did you read that report?
I didn't read it, but Chris gave me a idea that it was a very selective panel.
It was, but it's interesting to read the report. I think I can send it to you. It's not super long.
Okay.
There was also a couple of presentations that were shared with the group. And I found it interesting that in the one that Charlene Da Silvia, who works, she's responsible for the shark monitoring of the fishery department that used to be separate. They used to be together, environment and fishery. Then they split apart, and now they're back together. They do that every now and then. So she was responsible for the fishery of sharks, and in her presentation, she actually stated that in 2008, they did a study and they published this paper on the collapse of the soapfin sharks in Gansbaai, one of the staple food for white sharks, especially for juvenile white sharks. So there is proof, evidence that she showed of small shark crashed in the population, but yet she would not make the link and say that could have also be a problem for the shark, for the larger sharks. And it's like they work in separate boxes. They don't. Yeah.
I know this is speculation, but when a scientist can't make that connection, are they choosing not to? Is it part of their job security not to make that connection, or they're actually just that bad at their job as a scientist?
Your guess is as good as mine. The problem is the end result, I suppose. And what are we going to do about it? So whether it's intentional or just lack of understanding, background knowledge, big picture understanding, I don't know, whichever the cause, what are we going to do about it if when they call in a panel, they purposely exclude the people that actually collected the data? So is the disheartening part. And of course, as for every research, if you input rubbish in, the output is rubbish.
Mm.
So if you don't put in the right information, the output is bad.
I have to repeat what you just said in case anyone missed it. They excluded the people who collected the data. They didn't include them.
Yes. No. So
and it's getting
when we inquired about it, the answer was a very political blah 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 about the selection of specific people because they were part of workshop and group meetings before, and yeah, we all found out afterward. So
I've asked this of so many people, it's getting a little redundant, but just in case you have a new take on it, I'm going to ask, considering the money South Africa is losing, who gained by selling out the wildlife and getting maybe a short-term turnaround on some fishing? I mean, it just doesn't calculate. Is it just stupidity?
That is a very good question. I don't have a straight answer for you. I'm afraid it is lack of long-term projection of the action that are taken now. What are they going to do in the long term? I think unfortunately, the people making the rules are lacking this long-term understanding of the end result. So they will try to go for the feel-good solution, for the quick return of investment. And only when a stock collapses, only when there is nothing left, then they will turn around and try to act on the crisis that is already there. Unfortunately, in nature, you shouldn't work that way because it takes millions of years to restore something that you crash. So the reason, this crisis management is just terrible.
Is there?
Anyway, I don't think they understood that could have happened. I think they were just naive. They thought they were just hoping for, no, it's a cycle, they're going to come back. Yes, you counted so little, but other scientists are saying there are more. Surely there must be some more offshore. Surely, it was this hope, because if there is hope, then they don't have to take any action. And it is this, I won't say stupidity, but laziness for sure, of let things be unless there is a crisis, so that we don't invest money and energy on something that might be, might not be. And you will find this problem in between science and lawmakers at every single level. We model things, we predict things, we look at the data. But the problem is when a politician asks a scientist, are you 100% sure that that is the case? We will never say yes, because we can't. Because to be fair with our job, we are always 95% sure. We are sure within a reasonable amount of certainty, a statistically significant amount of certainty. But it's the nature of science that for me to be accurate, I will never tell you it's 100%. I will tell you it is, is fairly possible, but I will never give a black or white answer, because that is not how things actually works.
Correct.
And politicians will take that and say, oh, so there is a 5% chances that if we do nothing, everything's going to be okay. There is a 2% chances that if we keep on making money out of this, instead of tackling the problem, everything's going to be okay. And then 5-10 years down the line, they turn around and they go, oh, but there is a crisis. Why didn't the scientists tell us that was going to happen? And we're like, we did. You just didn't listen or didn't understand that when we say 95%, you should act.
But they're not making money. That's the point I'm getting at. Or is the
Um,
tourism so
oh,
strong that people are still coming to see the seven gills and the bronze whalers? Is that actually working?
no, I think, look, it's complicated, as for many things. We operate in South Africa. It's not an European country. The first priority are people that needs job, people that needs food. We have problems with electricity. We have sometimes problem with waters. The tourism sector, unfortunately, is not at the top of their priority list. So I trust, I'm not in this room, but my understanding is that if you get a minister of tourism next to a minister of fishery, the minister of fishery will take priority because fishery is a multi-billion-dollar industry. It creates job for people that don't need a degree to have a job. So it's big job creation. There is food and there is import and export. So the interest in fishery is much larger than the interest in preserving tourism. The problem with that is when you put into the table the word sustainability.
Mm-hmm.
And that is where the problems start rising. Because yes, fishery is key, is more important right now, it provides job, it provides food. However, is not all fishery is sustainable on the long term. Some are, but some aren't. So the ones that are not should be taken care of. And the one that where you have a conflict in between short-term income and long-term sustainable income, that should take priority. So that is where I believe the problem comes in. The people taking decision are more focused into this kind of box
didn't
ticking.
didn't they didn't they learn that lesson the last time the sharks disappeared, and then they had to get protected?
They they never do
Yeah.
because now the white sharks are gone, and oh look, cage diving are still operating with the bronze whalers.
Mm-hmm.
And sure, the dive center can't get people in the water for the seven gill, but look, there are still divers.
So it's
You
like you
see the
said,
problem.
it's not until everything's wiped out that they finally have to say, oops. How long before this most recent orca thing did your study warning about the numbers of white sharks come out? Because you did publish that before the whole, the orcas are wiping out white sharks, right?
So I published that in 2016 already. However, the South African government had my result on the population estimate in 2012. Because to work on white shark, you need a research permit. And as for research permit, you need to send in a report of your results every year to renew your research permit. So the data I collected in 2009, 10, and 11 that already showed that we didn't have more than 500, that was submitted in that report back into 10 years ago, 11 years ago. Then we had to add also the genetic data because in the meantime, another paper came out saying that the population estimate was closest to 1,000. So when we tried to publish our result just based on photo ID, we couldn't get published because the editor were saying, but they did the study in the same place. And they said the number is double. So that stopped us, prevented us from actually publishing. And funny enough, when I asked for the editor of the journal where the other work was published, if I can have access to their data so that I can check, because my suspicion is they double counted the same shark using lesser quality data. Or they also analyzed with that software for dolphin called Darwin.
The one that you said was very faulty.
That was very faulty. I got a student to test it out for me, so it was sort of independent. And 60% of the time, the software was failing to match the shark and thought it was a new shark. So when I asked for this data, the editors say, no, the author don't want to share their raw data. So because of that, I had to also add on the genetic work so that bigger paper came out, the combining photo ID and genetic, confirming each other. And that was published in 2016. So I lost, in a way, 4 years because of this other paper. And even after that, there was still debates and yeah, so it was a bit frustrating, if I might say.
And the argument that might be presented is, hey, this is science. We want to make sure that it's correct. We don't want anything inaccurate out there. But then they wouldn't share their data to be criticized.
Exactly. Yeah. And when they criticized mine, I actually told the people that were the colleagues that were criticizing the work, I told them, that science doesn't work that way. It's not, you cannot not believe my result. You can prove me wrong. Ask me for my data. I will share my data. I will give you all the photo. I share with you all the genetic work. You must redo the analysis, or you go out there, you collect more data than I did, and you prove me wrong. That is how science works. It's not a belief system. And I accept that. What I don't accept is when decisions are taken and arguments are built up over hearsay or over, oh, but I don't trust that is right. Shame. You are in the wrong field. Go study philosophy. So yeah.
Last time I spoke to you, you had 4,000 some very clear identifications, but that's your grand total. You didn't identify 4,000 and some individuals. You ended up with 500 and some individuals, or what was it?
426.
426. Wow.
Yeah.
That's not very many.
Yeah. No.
And now it's 0.
And now it's much less. Yeah. I'm not taking students to work on white sharks because there is no white shark to work on. I still get requests. Can I come and work? I had a master student that worked out on existing photo ID. But that's it. And I can't take another one because what are they going to do? You know?
The program in
So we focus on other bigger sharks in the hope that we can prevent them to end up with the same fate.
Yeah, because those bronze whalers are gonna, well, I don't know.
Yeah, we don't know. We don't know how many they are. We don't know the genetic profile. We don't know them. We don't know the bull sharks. There are very scattered information still. But there are more than me, few colleagues. Dr. Enriquez from the University of Pretoria also got funding to work on sharks genetics. So we hope to ramp up the information, but also start program in a way that we keep on monitoring them, because that's the other problem. Everything changes all the time. South Africa is considered a hotspot for climate change. Everything is in constant mutation. So we've got to keep on monitoring and producing up-to-date results. Otherwise, the government is already not acting swiftly enough. If we give them a snapshot of the situation now, it's going to take maybe 5 years for them to take action. And by then, things are different already. And if we don't have this continuous monitoring, the next study is going to be in 15 years. And then we go, oh, look, everything changed. What happened? No? It's just difficult because funds are lacking, and you need to try and find. Now that I'm not a postdoc any longer, now I have my own student. It's expensive to do research, especially in that field. It's not the same as walking up the mountain and do some land work. You need a boat with fuel, with a crew. You need chum if you want to attract sharks. Sometimes you need dive equipment. And then if it is genetic, you need the lab expenses as well. So yeah, it becomes very expensive very fast.
Okay, so bottom line, it wasn't the orcas, in your opinion, and in Data's opinion.
That's the thing, is we had this information before the orcas started, being something. So, and my bottom line is sure, they most likely contributed. However, there are other 5, 6 things that these animals are threatened from that we can act upon.
Mm-hmm.
The shark nets can be taken out. You can try to monitor this fishery better. You can reduce long lining. There is a lot of things that we are doing that we could do differently so that these animals can stand a chance. So why do you want to focus all of your attention on something like the orca instead of acting on what we can do? What is the worst case scenario? That maybe I'm dead wrong about it. The sharks did go somewhere east or offshore. We have no proof of it. But let's say all of my 426 sharks I did identify in Counsby 10 years ago, all of these 400 are now elsewhere and nobody knows where. And in 5 years' time, our coastline has clean water, no shark nets, a lot of food for them because we reduce the effort on the small sharks, and they come back in numbers. What do we have to lose?
Mm-hmm.
That's what I don't understand.
What was the grand total of white sharks that the orcas killed? Like 7, if even that many. So
Yeah.
my question is, without the white sharks there, have they targeted bronzies or anything else, or is it just over with? Or
I don't know. I know they've been killing seven gills
oh, right. Okay.
before on False Bay. There were some in Counsby as well. Recently, quite recently too. But it is so odd, this modus operandi from this orca, because it looks like, how does it work that you get these few individual, like 5, within a very short period of time washed, some with bite marks from orca, some didn't have, and then they had this massive amount of 7 gills also killed. There were like 10 or 13 within the same week, and then nothing. I mean, I'm not an orca expert, so maybe you should speak with somebody that does orca study, like Simon. Ask Simon Elwin.
Okay.
He does the orca thing. Just, is it normal? It doesn't sound like normal. I don't know.
Are you saying that maybe it wasn't even all orcas, or are you saying just that how weird these orcas are?
It's just how weird. Yeah, how weird. That's all I'm saying.
Okay. Okay. What other really obvious things did I forget to ask you about, or are we pretty much there?
I think that was it. If you wanted to know the story of the white sharks and how frustrating that was, I think that is. I can also add, if you want, that of course there are few orca now, they say, that are targeting the white shark, but others don't. But I remember orca and sharks being in the same area together in the past. I went and checked back footage from 2012, where a pod of orca was in Counsby. And on the same day, I collected 17 genetic samples from 17 different white sharks. And I photo ID 23. So, yeah, that's why I'm saying very, very odd and not relevant in the bigger scheme of things.
It's not a given that if an orca is present, the white shark will leave.
No.
Well, thank you for doing this follow-up, and I hope to see you in South Africa.
Cheers. Have a good one.
You too.
Thank you. Bye.